Welcome to the deep dive. So, you sent us some really interesting stuff about this idea. DaGs, you call them. We're going to jump right in.
Yeah, absolutely.
For you listening, we'll unpack what these DaGs actually are and, well, more importantly, why understanding them might actually change how you look at things.
Exactly. Your sources, they really frame DaGs as these differences, these gaps that pop up when we compare people or systems or entities within some context.
Okay.
So our mission here is to really get a handle on why these DaGs matter, both for us as individuals and for any groups we're involved with. The material digs into interactions, energy states, group goals, all that.
All right, let's do it. So first off, it strikes me that DaGs, they're not just one thing, are they? It feels like a really broad term covering all sorts of, well, differences and gaps.
That's spot on. And the sources make this point right away. Before you even start talking about DaGs, you've got to be clear on what kind you're looking at and what you're comparing them against. What's the baseline? Are we talking skills? Or maybe expectations versus what actually happened? Or energy levels? It really depends.
Right. You need that benchmark. And it sounds like the material really insists on seeing the whole picture. Like you need to look at all the DaGs in a system, not just cherry pick.
Yes, that's a really strong message in there. It warns against just focusing on a few DaGs without a good reason because they're apparently all interconnected. So if you ignore some, you might, miss something important or get the wrong idea altogether. It's pushing for a more holistic view.
Okay, and this is where it gets quite practical, I think. The sources talk about positive versus negative DaGs, especially at work. And, well, it seems we're kind of wired to zoom in on the negative ones.
That's definitely a common thing. In professional life, people often look at DaGs by comparing what they expected with what they got.
Yeah.
So negative DaGs are usually the problems. Low quality, missed deadlines, things not working efficiently. Those are the failures that grab our attention.
And the positive ones are the successes, where things went better than planned. But even then, it sounds like the main energy goes into fixing the stuff that went wrong.
Precisely. The material points out this tendency, this fixation almost on the negative. But then it flips it, offering this really counterintuitive idea.
Which is?
Well, it argues that these negative DaGs, these problems, have actually been huge drivers of innovation and, well, adaptation throughout history.
Ah, okay. Like necessity being the mother of invention.
Exactly like that. So these apparent failures, these negative gaps, aren't just things to be avoided. The source actually calls them the heart of innovation.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. When things break, you figure out how to fix them, maybe even make them better.
Right. And the bigger the negative DaG, the more likely it is to trigger, serious investigation, bringing in experts, maybe even leading to whole new fields. Complexity science is mentioned as an example, emerging from trying to understand these gaps.
But hang on, it's not quite black and white, is it? Like, negative DaGs force innovation, positive ones are just good. The source adds a wrinkle there about perception.
That's a really critical point about perspective, yeah. Even if a project is a success on paper, delivered on time, under budget, a positive DaG, some people involved might still see it negatively.
How so?
Well, maybe they didn't get the bonus they were promised, or they feel their hard work wasn't recognized. So what looks positive from, say, a management viewpoint might feel pretty negative to an individual.
So context, and whose context, is absolutely key. Someone's failure might make perfect sense from their own point of view, even if it doesn't align with the official plan.
Absolutely. The source stresses that what individuals want or aim for doesn't always perfectly match the group's stated goals. Understanding those different motivations is crucial to understanding the DaG itself.
And it's not just about blame or praise, then. It's about learning, right? Learning from both the good and the bad outcomes, figuring out who benefited, who struggled, and why.
Exactly. You want to take those lessons and apply them elsewhere. But interestingly, there's also a warning about the positive DaGs.
Oh.
Yeah, this idea that you can overexploit success. You push too hard based on a positive outcome, stretch things too thin, and potentially turn that success into a future negative DaG. It's about not getting complacent, I suppose.
Which implies there needs to be some kind of agreement or discussion about which DaGs are okay, which aren't, and what to do about them. And crucially, who gets to decide if people don't agree?
That's a really important point about how groups function, about governance. Without clarity on that, you just end up with conflict over these differences.
Okay, so the discussion then pivots a bit, moving from groups to the individual level. How do DaGs affect us personally? It mentions negative ones causing discomfort, positive ones, comfort.
Yes, and it immediately adds that this feeling, comfort or discomfort, isn't the same for everyone. It varies between people and even for one person over time. It depends a lot on our energy states and how we're using that energy to meet our goals.
Right. And this links into conditioning and resilience. Conditioning being how we sort of adapt our energy use, and resilience being how we adapt our response to energy demands.
Exactly. And the source is clear. These are deep, innate processes. Not just us consciously deciding to change a behavior. It's more fundamental than that.
Like muscles adapting to exercise.
Sort of, yeah. Think of condition like learning to manage your energy better when facing a tough task, a negative DAG. Resilience is then how well you bounce back from the strain of that task. These things are always happening, adapting us.
And the text gives examples like getting used to tough physical work or learning to handle high-pressure mental tasks. That's conditioning and resilience building through facing those challenges, those negative DAGs.
Precisely. Those demanding situations actually hone how we use our energy, physical, mental, even emotional energy, and make us more resilient in those specific contexts.
Okay, but then there's the flip side. What if you only encounter easy stuff, neutral or positive DAGs all the time?
Yeah.
Could that actually make you less resilient?
That's a really interesting point the source makes. If everything's smooth sailing, you don't develop those adaptive responses as much.
Because you don't need to.
Right. The example given is someone who's fine with their daily routine, but just falls apart in an emergency. They have enough energy day to day, but they haven't been conditioned to mobilize it effectively when things get tough.
Or the outdated knowledge example information just sits there unchallenged, positive or neutral maybe, but it loses its edge, its usefulness.
Exactly. It hasn't been adapted. But there are limits, of course. The source emphasizes that conditioning and resilience aren't infinite. Natural laws apply.
Meaning you can't just push through anything.
Right. Too much imbalance in one area, like extreme physical exhaustion or total cognitive overload, can cause a collapse, even if you're supported elsewhere. You can misdirect energy trying to fix things the wrong way if the core imbalance isn't addressed.
And it mentions trade-offs too, like getting really good at one thing might mean you're less good at others. Sensory compensation is mentioned as an example.
Yeah, developing expertise often means focusing your adaptive energy. It can come at a cost elsewhere. And related to that is this concept of normalization of deviance.
Oh, that sounds ominous.
Well, it's this idea that we can gradually get used to risky situations if nothing bad happens immediately. We become conditioned to the risk, stop seeing it as risky, and that can lead to problems down the line.
Right, the danger just becomes normal. And it also says that getting used to a new normal, even a good one, can make it hard to go back or adapt again later.
Exactly. Someone used to a very comfortable life might really struggle if circumstances change. They're conditioned to positive DAGs. Or someone who escaped hardship might resist anything resembling those old conditions, even if it's necessary for some reason.
And this all connects back to groups. The source draws parallels with things like allostasis and homeostasis in biology, how systems maintain stability.
Yeah, it's suggesting these adaptation and resilience principles operate at collective levels too, not just within individuals. Social systems also have ways of responding to DAGs to maintain themselves.
Okay, so bringing it back to context. The material also warns against getting too hung up on every little difference, right? While some DAGs are definitely problems, not all variation is bad.
That's right. It gives examples like a minor misunderstanding about a deadline versus a critical error in safety instructions. Clearly different levels of concern.
Yeah.
And it mentions things like the gap between work as imagined and work as done in safety. Those are definitely unwelcome. DAGs organizations try to minimize.
But we tend to label lots of things as gaps, plans versus reality, theory versus practice. The caution is against trying to stamp out all of that variation.
Precisely. The source argues that trying to detect and eliminate every single difference can actually be counterproductive. Some variation is natural, even healthy. Obsessing over minimizing everything can interfere with those natural conditioning and resilience processes we just talked about.
And the example used is a tech company, right? Super focused on the tech innovation. They're positive DAGs, but totally neglecting organizational stuff like training or morale.
Yes, and that imbalance eventually causes problems. It highlights the danger of focusing too narrowly on certain DAGs while ignoring others. You need a balanced perspective.
Okay, so pulling this all together, the big message seems to be DAGs aren't inherently bad. In fact, they're kind of essential for adaptation, for resilience, for innovation.
Absolutely. They show us where things are misaligned, yes, but also where the opportunities are, where the risks lie. They're catalysts.
They trigger adaptation, help build resilience, drive progress through different ways of thinking.
Yeah, all of that. But the key, as you said, is balance. Not getting fixated on only negative ones or only positive ones or trying to eliminate all difference.
And the source actually suggests some actions, doesn't it? Like things we can actively do.
It does. It suggests we should actively identify DAGs in our groups or systems, then leverage them, use them strategically to build resilience.
Promote diversity of thought, too, since DAGs often come from different viewpoints.
Right. And address DAGs systematically, not just reactively. And finally, evaluate the outcomes continuously. Keep learning from how we handle them.
So really, understanding DAGs seems like a way to reframe things we might see as problems or disparities. Turn them into chances for growth, for becoming more resilient, more innovative.
Exactly. It's about seeing the potential value in those differences and gaps, creating a more dynamic and adaptive environment, both for ourselves and our teams.
This has been really, really insightful. Okay, so to wrap up, considering DAGs are just everywhere all the time, here's something to think about. What if you intentionally created small, manageable, negative DAGs in your own life or work? Could that be a way to proactively build resilience or maybe even spark some unexpected innovation? Definitely food for thought. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.